Welcome to the Daily Exchange. We're here with Jesse Lund at IBM Think 2019. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Jesse Lund is the VP of Blockchain and Digital Currencies at IBM, obviously including the IBM WorldWire, and we're here to talk all about that. It's a global remittance platform based on the public Stellar network, which has long been one of the world's top cryptocurrencies by market cap. Jesse, I guess we've been talking about quantum computing today and the blockchain. Guys, do check that out as well. That's an incredible session. Very, very detailed and very technical. It was incredible. Right now we're going to talk about IBM specifically and Stellar and the protocol. Can we start by just Jesse telling us about the IBM WorldWire? Like, what's the problem that you're trying to solve there?
Well, the problem right now with international payments, right? When we're sending money from one person to another person, it's crossing a geographic boundary, right? And actually crossing currencies where foreign exchange is involved is a really heavy and cumbersome process that hasn't really been re-engineered or optimized in 50, 60 years or more. And so when you think about the pace of change and the user expectations of the digital natives of today who expect information to flow instantaneously, there's no technical reasons or technical barriers that should prevent money from flowing the same way.
Okay, right? And you've built this on the Stellar network. Can you tell us how is the XLM sort of token involved with this?
Yeah, so the architecture of WorldWire is really a cross-border payment network, the magic of which, if you will, the novelty of, is the ability to send payment message instructions saying, hey, I'm sending you something, get ready, and on the other end, the receiver is making sure that who you're sending it to is not, some nefarious actor or bad actor. But once that happens, and that happens really fast, then we send the value along with it. And so that transfer of value is made possible by an ecosystem of digital instruments, settlement instruments, digital assets, of which Lumens is one. So we see Lumens as a viable settlement instrument in this ecosystem of cross-border payments.
Okay. Now, just to sort of contrast that, it sounds a little like, this is in the same realm as with Ripple to some extent. Can you sort of tell our community sort of how to compare and sort of contrast that as to how that's different and what you guys are sort of doing?
Yeah, so I think credit Ripple for the vision of using a digital asset in order to enact immediate settlement with finality. I think their implementation followed one path. Our implementation is a little bit different. We're not the issuer of an asset. In fact, what we believe is that there should be an ecosystem, a variety of digital assets that provide the settlement instruments that enable these cross-border payments. And the participants on the network should be able to choose and negotiate their choices in real time. And the pricing might be different depending on the settlement instrument you use.
Okay.
So I think with Ripple, they're looking at XRP as their primary digital asset for settlement. For us, it could be Lumens, it could be Ripple, it could be XRP even, it could be Bitcoin, but it would also probably include other instruments like stable coins and even eventually, soon, hopefully, central bank issued digital currencies.
Okay. So with the actual product itself, who provides the end product? Who provides WorldWire? Is that a financial institution? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So WorldWire is the network, and IBM's long game in this is kind of to be the network operator. So the subscribers, the customers, if you will, of WorldWire are market makers who really provide the pay-in and pay-out locations, and they themselves have corporate clients and probably retail clients. So they've got their own client base. So really providing kind of the conduit, the pipeline, if you will, through which money can flow in real time. And the customers are the market makers that enable this real-time FX to happen.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Stellar now.
Yeah.
In terms of IBM obviously has its own blockchain with Hyperledger Fabric. Can you tell us, why did you sort of choose Stellar at first rather than, say, Hyperledger?
Yeah. So Hyperledger Fabric is a protocol that we've invested in, and we're now really investing, if you consider the development resources that we're putting into Stellar as well. But Hyperledger Fabric is really designed for private permission networks, and we can explain a little bit more about what that means, whereas Stellar is a public permission network. So if you look at the spectrum of kind of blockchain architectures or topologies, technologies, you have sort of this enterprise space, which IBM is really good at participating in. That's kind of our bread and butter. And so we built a blockchain protocol, Hyperledger Fabric, that kind of goes after that to make large enterprises, to give them a toolkit to help them to establish private transactional networks on their own, right? On the other end of that spectrum is kind of the free-for-all, the Wild West, the Bitcoin, where you don't need to know anybody can join the network. You kind of come, you don't need to trust anybody. The network itself provides some level of trust to allow you to transact or interact. In the middle somewhere is kind of a hybrid approach where it's a publicly accessible network. Kind of anybody can join and through some validator provide transactions on the network, but it's still permissioned. You know who the validators are in some ways, or there's some kind of trust built in to the validating entities on the network. And that's why we picked Stellar. Because for this particular use case, we felt like there had to be a public network underneath, right? Because transparency is really key, especially to kind of the underlying social movements that are driving this new technology, but also needed to be scalable, right? So we picked Stellar because it's a scalable protocol. You know, initially out of the gate, we needed to support thousands of transactions per second, right? And so that's a tall feat for some of the other blockchain capabilities, technologies that are out there. So there's a few reasons that we picked it, and we see them very complementary with what we're doing with Hyperledger Fabric too.
Okay, just going to pick up on one of your points there. So Hyperledger is a private blockchain and Stellar is a public one. Can you explain the difference between a public and a private blockchain?
Yes, so a private blockchain is a network that is convened between parties who know each other very well and may have indeed contractual relationships with each other. And it's a way for them to share data and to share computing resource in kind of a controlled environment. A public blockchain, on the other hand, is based on some of the same principles, but really it's open for public access. So you don't have to be part of the club to join in. So here's the analogy I liken it to. Private blockchains are like country clubs. You got to know somebody to get in. They got to sponsor you to get in. Public blockchains are like the community swimming pool where you show up and you meet people when you're there, yeah. Right? It's kind of that's the difference between the two.
Awesome. Has there ever been competition between, I guess, Stellar and Hyperledger at IBM?
No, in fact, I think there's a complement there, at least as it relates to our strategy of building solutions, because there are use cases that really require or demand a private permission model, and there are use cases that really require demand a public or a publicly accessible network as well. And so we see it kind of filling a spectrum of capabilities at that low level, that protocol, distributed ledger technology level, that gives us choices and our clients choices on the solutions they build.
Okay. Specifically about Stellar, so how is Stellar Lumens, the XLM token, actually used on the network?
Yeah. So in general, it's used really as what we would think of as gas, right? It powers transactions on the network. So transactions have a very small cost, and really that is just a deterrent to prevent bad actors from kind of spamming the network and bringing the network down. So there has to be a cost associated with transactions, but it's very low, right? So its primary point is not to make money. Its primary point is to deter bad behavior, right? That's one way that lumens are used, and that's fundamental to the protocol itself. In WorldWire, we use lumens as a settlement instrument, right? So if someone is sending money from Canada to Brazil, just pick these at random. There is really no direct trading pair that I know of between Canadian dollars and Brazilian reals. Right? It has to trade through an intermediate currency. We talk about that FX happening in real time. It happens through an intermediate store of value that is a digital asset. And we talked about a variety of digital assets that we support. Lumens is one of them. So you could send money from Canada to Brazil, and what's happening that you don't really see is it's actually moving through Lumens as a settlement instrument. It's the Lumens that encapsulates the store of value that's being transmitted from one party to another before and after it's being converted to fiat currency.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I know that sounds complicated, but it all happens as a sequence of actions or operations that all happen really fast.
Wow. Right, so on and off ramp, and it being the money in between. That's
exactly.
incredible.
That's what it is. It's a bridge currency.
Would WorldWire potentially also look at other assets, like these security tokens and other places for it to get to? Are there plans for those kind of things?
Within WorldWire right now, I'd say no, not on the roadmap, because there are different regulatory constraints, and we would need to think about those. I will say, however, that the Stellar Protocol and the Stellar Development Foundation is thinking forward there. And if you recall, they just acquired Chain, and they formed this new commercial entity called Interstellar, which is really looking at trying to commercialize the distributed exchange that already exists inside of the Stellar network. So there's actually an order book that would support the sale or the swap of different assets, right? So it would be a great registry as a network protocol for other asset classes. So we see that coming on the horizon.
Okay.
For sure.
So maybe if you can tell us a bit about now the roadmap of WorldWire, sort of where you're at. I know you said there's an announcement coming up. Can you give us a bit of a preview into some of that?
Yeah. So within the next few weeks, I'll say, people like yourselves, like agencies and reporters, will get a pre-read of an announcement that we're going to make on a global scale in a high-profile place. I can share with you because it's already out there a little bit. I'll be keynoting a major event in Singapore with my friend Jed McCaleb, and I think he's probably the headliner. They're probably coming to see him, but we're going to be sharing the stage together. He's going to be talking about digital assets in the future and what Stellar is all about. We'll be talking about the partnership together, and we'll be making a special announcement there about the product and really what it includes. Our goal, though, in terms of the roadmap, as you asked, is to continue to expand the network, inviting more participants to join. It doesn't cost anything to join the network. It doesn't cost anything to be a member of the network. You kind of pay for what you use. So as you're moving money, we capture a small fee of the money that's flowing through the network to be the network operator to maintain it. We hope to have, within 3 to 5 years, hundreds of endpoints, hundreds of operators that are providing access to these endpoints and really enabling us to have global coverage. The ability to send money from any place in the world to any other place in the world across all currencies in real time at a really low fee. That's the goal for this.
Awesome. Let's talk about yourself personally, Jesse. Why did you leave a career in banking to get into cryptocurrency?
It's funny you asked. So I remind people at IBM when we get into uncomfortable situations that I left a really good job at a pretty good company down the street here, Stagecoach out front, to join IBM. It turns out IBM is also a really good company, and the reason that I did that was because in my former job at Wells Fargo, the last part of my tenure there was running the innovation labs, the enterprise innovation labs that's part of the enterprise innovation group. And so I controlled a portion of the R&D budget that was focused on certain domains, and one of those was blockchain. And it started out in 2013. We actually bought Bitcoin so that the capital markets group could write a position paper to understand what it was, and it moved on to all of these other use cases. And for me, as a financial services guy, working in a bank, working on advanced technologies, and then coming across this Bitcoin and then blockchain technology, I thought this is going to revolutionize everything. This is really going to change everything that happens here. If you think about banks, their primary function historically has been loans and deposits, right? Taking risk and lending out money, providing a safe place and a fair return on deposits that they hold for people, and building a business on that spread. And they're taking that risk and they're promoting economic growth through the risk that they're taking. Banks actually create money through the lending process. Banks have become kind of I think unreasonably dependent upon payments revenue, fee revenue, right? And that's being attacked by this range of fintechs. And so I see blockchain as this enabling technology that really is going to force banks into a change. I just wanted to be a part of it. Not that I hate banks. They've been a great part of my life and my career. I think banks are good inherently.
Yeah.
You look at banks and you think that they do bad things. They don't do bad things. They're not bad. They're just too big. And they become too dependent on fee-based revenue, which really doesn't add any value.
Okay. And in terms of, I guess for yourself, do you sort of have a personal view or vision of blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, I do. I think we're at the nascent stages of it now, and there's a lot of people. We move at the speed of thought, because we can communicate in real time, and so that's changed the way our brains work and the way we think, the way we expect things. So I say be patient, but I do think the landscape of banking, lending, payments is going to radically change, and it's going to change the composition of banks. It's already started to a little bit, but I think looking out into the future, this notion of cash, ATM machines, I think 50 years from now, we're going to look back and say, paper money, what was that? Or what do you mean I had to wait? What do you mean a deposit hold? I can't, and that, because you're talking about the end of one generation or two generations and the rise of others who don't remember what the world was like before the internet. Yeah, and so we've already seen it. I mean, we've seen it in mobile technologies to this day, and blockchain's just the next paradigm shift.
Okay. And for yourself, how do you, Stellar has a philanthropic foundation, and has some goals around that. Is that sort of, part of your belief with Stellar and things like that? Do you like the philanthropic side, the banking the unbanked and things like that?
Yeah, I love it. So one of the things that I did in my former job at Wells Fargo was being involved in a lot of different areas. And so we had interaction with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And I really came to an appreciation, kind of an awakening, that first of all, it was surreal for me to realize that 3 billion people in the world live under the poverty level, right? And the poverty level is like $3 a day. I mean, I can't, that's less than a cup of Starbucks coffee, right? And almost half the world's population is living day to day on just that amount. But then you kind of drill into those stats, and there's 2 billion adults in the world who are unbanked. They don't have access to financial services, right? Probably because they live in emerging regions, emerging markets where they're risky, there's political risk, and so the banks won't come in. But the encouraging thing about all of that is the telcos have been there first. And 1 billion of those 2 billion people are carrying smartphones and have the capacity to hold digital value, to store money, to bank, to transfer payments. You've already seen it happening with this M-Pesa phenomenon, right? The telco companies are actually providing a payments mechanism. Again, that's just the beginning. And so the idea of making the world smaller, not just on the flow of information, but on the flow of financial services and money, creates an open door for these emerging economies to grow faster and to participate. And that just raises the quality of life for people that live in those regions. And I mean, we should be all about that. I mean, at some point in our register, that should be something we think about in whatever we're doing, I think, whether it's banking, whether it's technology, whether it's, growing food, we should be thinking about how can we kind of bring sort of equilibrium to economic prosperity for everyone.
Awesome stuff.
Love it.
Oh, incredible. If there was one thing you could sort of explain or give a takeaway for everyone who's sort of, trying to understand cryptocurrency and blockchain, what's that one thing you'd love to tell them?
Well, I would say there's a lot of speculation on cryptocurrency prices, and I think there's a mindset because cryptos are so accessible through these exchanges that they're somehow securities or they trade like stocks, and that's true. But I think we need to shift our behavior and recognize that our behaviors in trading these assets, which are a unique kind of asset class in many ways, determines the price. So in some ways, there's a democracy that we have, or at least a federated democracy of controlling the price, if you will, of these. And what we forget is that the utility of the network that these digital assets live on is dependent upon the price of the asset, because a higher price actually creates more liquidity, and more liquidity raises the value of the utility of the network itself. And so I would just try to get people to think more, not in terms of value changes, that they're somehow securities or they trade like stocks, and that's true. But I think we need to shift our behavior and recognize that our behaviors in trading these assets, which are a unique kind of asset class in many ways, determines the price. So in some ways, there's a democracy that we have, have, or at least a federated democracy of controlling the price, if you will, of these. And what we forget is that the utility of the network that these digital assets live on is dependent upon the price of the asset, because a higher price actually creates more liquidity, and more liquidity raises the value of the utility of the network itself. And so I would just try to get people to think more, not in terms of value of the coin, whatever their favorite coin is, but think about the utility of that coin in a network. If Bitcoin, which is everyone's favorite to talk about and to beat up on, but if the price of Bitcoin were higher, there would be more liquidity in the network. We could be having a really different discussion with exchanges that they're somehow securities, or they trade like stocks, and that's true. But I think we need to shift our behavior and recognize that our behaviors in trading these assets, which are a unique kind of asset class in many ways, determines the price. So in some ways, there's a democracy that we have, or at least a federated democracy of controlling the price, if you will, of these. And what we forget is that the utility of the network that these digital assets live on is dependent upon the price of the asset, because a higher price actually creates more liquidity, and more liquidity raises the value of the utility of the network itself. And so I would just try to get people to think more, not in terms of value of the coin, whatever their favorite coin is, but think about the utility of that coin in a network. If Bitcoin, which is everyone's favorite to talk about and to beat up on, is that they're somehow securities, or they trade like stocks, and that's true. But I think we need to shift our behavior and recognize that our behaviors in trading these assets, which are a unique kind of asset class in many ways, determines the price. So in some ways, there's a democracy that we have, or at least a federated democracy of